Risk management is at the heart of what we do. Our deep-rooted industry and technical expertise enables us to manage the unique risks your business faces.
Welcome back. We're taking a look at the impact of COVID-19 on the construction sector, and for that discussion, still joining me via Zoom is Russell Myers, the CEO of Mirabilis, Seamus Casserly, the CEO of Lockton South Africa, and Martin Vass from Specialist Adjusters. Gents, before the break we were talking about risk and we kind of veered off a little bit, and it was quite worrying there to see that everyone's getting old or leaving and we're not too sure what's going to happen to the industry as a result. But talking about risk, how important does it become to have a broker or an insurer that understands the construction industry at this point in time? Martin, I see.
Well, I can start off with saying it is absolutely imperative that the broker fully understands the risk and goes to an insurer and sets out that risk so the insurer is fully aware of what he's insuring. It is absolutely imperative that the broker understands the industry. And that is not always the case. Obviously, with Seamus, that is the case, but it's not always the case, and it is a worry.
Seamus, do you want to add there, because years and years of experience obviously comes into play, and like at the top I said, this is a web. It is complicated. It's not something anyone can advise on, or just anyone, I should say, that can advise on the pitfalls here to make sure that when claims are put in, they are actually paid out.
Well, the issue is quite simple. There is a contract generally with a principal, and that contract specifies what the contractor will undertake to deliver and at what price. And generally, the debate happens where there is an intervening cause, let's call it water or flood, or there's a fire or potentially a strike or whatever it is at the site, and therefore the contractor cannot fulfill on his obligations and that which he's contracted to do. So it's imperative that one understands how a contract functions, firstly, the type of contract, what responsibilities are assumed by each of the parties involved, and then going to an underwriter who understands contracting and in fact engaging with them to make sure. And once again, if people know what they're doing, you don't get stupid questions asked or stupid presumptions made. And that's why, in dealing with Mirabilis and Russell particularly, we end up not having these issues and not having these debates.
I want to know.
I see Seamus, you're leaving the loss adjuster out on that one as well.
Well, Martin, you've had enough airtime already, I think. So.
Okay, well then let's take it back to Russell, and perhaps Seamus, you can step in on this as well. Does insurance change for the construction industry? We were talking about COVID and some of the impacts that could potentially have further down the line, even if we aren't seeing it play out now. Are there products that address those specific needs? Or are we looking at something very, I don't want to oversimplify here and say simple, that the policies that we have at the moment, the kinds of insurances we have, is what will cover us, because there's nothing outside of that that could happen?
Well, there are standard wordings, for instance, which are accepted globally. And the cover under these wordings, which is called an all-risk cover, is generally that. There are obviously specific projects which might require specific clauses or specific covers which might not be available or might not have been thought of. I mean, for instance, renewable energy, etc., has brought with it its own special requirement, especially where you have projects which are funded by lenders. You start getting what we call these seamless products, where the whole project is covered by one insurer or one reinsurer to ensure there's no gaps. So there's always a development of products, but generally in insurance or construction insurance, I haven't seen the basic cover doesn't really change. You can just have additional covers which cover, for instance, you'll have faulty part or faulty material, that never used to be available. Now it's becoming more commonplace, those sort of things. But these come out of the international markets anyway and are slowly recognized in South Africa and put to use.
Okay.
But generally,
Okay, so say you're a construction company now, you've managed to survive the tough times we've just come through, you're well insured, you've mitigated some of your risks, you've chatted to your expert broker. Are you now ideally positioned to take advantage of what government has put forward? They've got a kitty, they're saying, of 100 billion rand over the next 10 years that they're going to disperse into infrastructure to get the economy going again. But how much of a lifeline is it really to the construction industry? How much are we going to see it filter through? Is it going to be quick enough to save some of these guys?
You said 100 billion.
Yeah, 100 billion rand over the next 10 years.
That's hardly a dent, or that's hardly a ripple on the lake, so to speak. I mean, that won't really go anywhere in terms of the industry to save the industry. I think perhaps $100 billion might be more likely to do something.
Yes.
But I mean,
So if
look, Russell, having said that, remember the number of contractors out there has dropped dramatically. Yes, it has decreased dramatically. But as you say, if it's 100 billion over 10 years, I actually heard a figure about 304 billion, but 100 billion over 10 years is really not going to help the industry.
Well, that's a billion rand. What's a 10 billion rand a year? That's I mean, Discovery building alone cost about 3 to 4 billion. So that's one sort of building like that a year. Or that's not really.
Well, one power station is 3 times that. So yes, exactly. That's not going to. That's
without the price going up and up and up every time.
So if that's a drop in the ocean, are we going to see any growth from this sector going forward?
Well, I guess it's not going to, not necessarily from government. So this is going to take.
I think the future lies in public-private partnerships.
Yeah.
Where the private sector takes control over the project and the project disbursements and stuff like that, and drives the initiatives because they have a commercial interest in making sure that those projects prevail. And I suspect that is what the government is thinking about in developing infrastructural projects where it is entering or thinking of entering into PPPs, which will assist it. And I think that's an underpin of the industry, but I think it can't represent more than 10%. Otherwise, we will remain, as a construction industry, we will remain in trouble.
Absolutely. Well, those PPE have worked in the past. When you think of the ones that have already been implemented, I mean, you think of the Gautrain, you think of the toll roads, the fleet management, water and sanitation, hospitals. Yes, and renewables.
Well, power specifically.
And power, yes, and power.
We can't, Eskom can't do it anymore. We need to get the production of power out of the SOE and into the hands of the responsible people and companies who can actually manage it properly and keep it going.
Quite right.
And what PPEs do encourage is foreign investment because they see it working and they see a degree of control and they see decent quality of management and control taking responsibility for these returns, and thereby they can see a positive outlook. Whereas if it was purely state and it's a building of a bridge that isn't tolled, for example, we can't see much of a future for that because the return to the economy is over once the construction is over. So you almost need more of an involvement from private enterprise in order to secure these revenues going forward.
And I think you can see that in the solar plants where you have a lot of the private sector involvement there. And as you say, the lenders are seeing a return and they're willing to invest in those. But if it's purely a government, they're not prepared to invest.
So are private-public partnerships really the way forward? Is that what you see as really shocking the industry back into growth? Am I reading that correctly?
Well, provided there's a need for it. I mean, if the economy I mean, it's almost a bit of a chicken and egg, isn't it? I mean, if the economy's not there, what point is there in building power stations? And if you're not going to get the economy running until you've got power stations to power the economy. So, yeah. But nevertheless, we do need to move these into public-private partnerships. And, as already mentioned, the money won't be flowing until the management of these projects and the return on the project can be, let's say, secured.
And the other problem, the government at the moment is heavily restrained. There's going to be a rapid decrease in the amount of tax revenue coming in. They're committed to huge expense as far as the public sector is concerned, the SOEs, et cetera, and even wage demands. So there's actually very little with it. I think they're talking about a drop of 18 billion in the tax revenue this year on year. So, they don't have the money to actually put into these projects.
Absolutely. We talk a lot about government's role here. We talk about a lot of money being put to work. We talk about private-public partnerships that need to come into play. What other growth-enhancing structural reforms would you like to see here, Seamus?
Yeah, look, I think I think the government needs to underpin these initiatives, and where there is a long tail type involvement, and I use water supply to Gauteng as an example of that, and the likelihood of a return over 10 years is quite slim, I would argue, in that pipeline that they're proposing. So I think that those long-term issues, and if government contains itself to those longer term where the return is less certain, that's probably the role that would be best suited for them. And that those that have more financing capability or an ability to service debt and initiatives along those lines, whereas our renewable energy is a wonderful example of how well that has performed over the years. And the mere fact that nobody trusted it in round one is just fascinating. Nobody trusted the government to do the right thing, but they have done the right thing, as is witnessed now with the fourth and fifth rounds, where the price of generation has come down to, in some instances, 20% of what the round one figures were, the revenue figures were. So I think it's wonderful to see. And if that can be mirrored in some way, shape, or form in other areas of industry, I think it would be quite positive, be positively received.
Well, on that note, let's leave it there. We're unfortunately out of time. I think we could have spoken for days unpacking all of this. Gents, thank you so much for joining us. That was Russell Myers, he's the CEO of Mirabilis, and Seamus Casserly is the CEO of Lockton South Africa, and of course Martin Vass is from Specialist Adjusters. And from me, Bronwyn Seaborn, it's goodbye for now.
33 countries, 75 innovative risk solutions, over 100 years of experience. It all adds up to being the largest general insurer in Africa.